special in the showcase here at SwissWatchExpo, we've got a lot of Pateks today, Patek Philippes, that kind of span a really Art Deco style, and they're funky. And we want to talk about funky Pateks. We're going to do something a little bit fun today. We're not going to get into a lot of complicated talk about them because, why? These were built for one specific reason, to look wild.
Yeah, they certainly do. When you see watches that are any shape other than round, it's always interesting, and I think that with the exception of maybe Cartier, the variety of the creativity that you see from Patek Philippe is just unrivaled. It's phenomenal when you look at these watches, how much variety there is, and as you look through the catalog of vintage Patek Philippe watches, it's no wonder people gravitate towards collecting them because there's so much that you could do with it.
Absolutely. And so when I very first started out with this, we think about the videos, we try to create them here so that you can have something interesting and fun to see and to kind of display for you the different types of watches that we carry at SwissWatchExpo, because we're not just a one-hit wonder. There's so many companies out there that only sell you the most recent stuff, and okay, it's pre-owned, but they only are 3 or 4 years old. We have watches here that go back all the way to the 1930s and 40s,
yep,
which I think is one of the coolest things about SwissWatchExpo. You have to remember that the watch business isn't, especially with the pre-owned business, isn't just about yesterday's model, it's about yesteryear's model. And so what we should do is focus on some of the things, the highlights of these models, because let's be honest, there's not a lot of information, especially on Patek Philippe, until you get your extract from Patek. If you don't have the paperwork and all the history behind it, we get a lot of questions about, do you know who owned it? Do you know the history? Well, these things don't have kind of like a car, a title history to review to see when it was purchased, where, who owned it, these kinds of things. These aren't known unless you have a purchaser or a seller who comes in and tells us that, right?
So you could end up with a watch that, say, Winston Churchill wore.
You really could. And more importantly, I think about this all the time. So I see Johnny Carson, I see Rodney Dangerfield, I see one of the things, the fellow from Home Improvement, Tim, what's his face?
Yeah.
Anyway, during Home Improvement, Tim wore a white dial, Datejust Jubilee two-tone with the Roman numerals. And I always wonder if he's ever sold that and it's out in the marketplace somewhere, you know.
And I just saw that, I guess it's old news now, but I didn't come across it until recently, that last year, I guess, Kim Kardashian paid, I think, $380,000 for a Cartier tank watch that had been owned by Princess Diana.
See, that's the kind of thing. And how would you know?
No, I'm sorry. It was Jackie O. It was a Cartier watch that was owned by Jackie O.
My goodness. You see, and so conceivably, we could have watches that come through here that have been owned by people that are famous. Now, we have had watches that have been engraved from, like, Coca-Cola, for example.
Right.
We've had watches that came from the Chevrolet division for somebody who had been at Chevrolet for 50 years. You know, we had one for 25 years.
We've had those Domino's pizza watches that have the Domino's logo on the dial. You got to really like pizza to want that watch. But we've also had the ones that were given to the National Football Championship teams, even going back to the 60s.
I think we had Matt Ryan's Hulk here at one point, too, or GMT or something. It's really a bit vague. But so let's talk about the fun things about the Patek shapes that we have here. Now, one thing that should be very, very clear in folks' minds, these do, as we said, we don't have the history on these, so you can't even quite know what year it is until you apply for the extract. That's one of the things about Patek Philippe that you always need to do. If you're an owner of a Patek Philippe and you really want to have that customized personal feel to your watch, when you purchase it from us, if we don't happen to have the paperwork or the extract on that particular watch, go to Patek Philippe and apply for it, because it'll be in your name, it'll be yours, and you will be able to start the history from that point, and then you can pass that down to your family with the history, or even sell it later on, and people will start having a tracked history of it.
And that extract is not expensive anymore. It used to be like $1,200, but now with the age of being able to access things by computer, I think they're down to about $150.
We do have the extract for at least one. I know that for a fact, and that's the square model here. The thing about the Patek Philippe in these particular shapes, as I understand it, these are all considered the quote-unquote Gondolo series. Now, I happen to be wearing one that has just come in. It happens to be one of the largest Patek Philippes that I've seen in I think ever. Patek used to make 48 millimeter watches, believe it or not.
Really?
Wrist watches. We talked about this in one of our other videos where they would take a pocket watch and turn it into a wristwatch, right? And they would do that. They would typically do that with a 46, 48, 50 millimeter pocket watch. Now, you can imagine how thick those were. Well, Patek actually scaled those down. I've never physically seen one. The pictures are hard to find. Gondolo it was called the Gondolo Gang out of Brazil.
Okay.
And this was a group of people of about 150 or so Brazilians that collected watches during it started in kind of 1872 and went to sort of the 19-teens, right?
Okay.
And so these people were heavy into the jewelry business. They wanted to make sure that they were the top elite echelon of watch owners. This was a huge deal in Brazil. And in fact, 1/3 of all Patek Philippes were sold in Brazil.
Wow.
During a time in Europe when watch sales were really far down. Now, later on in the 1920s in the United States, really from the 19-teens until the mid-1930s, watch design, the competition for extremely wealthy individuals to have extremely complicated watches was a huge competition, and they just sort of fought back and forth to who had the fanciest watch, right? So Patek Philippe's have always been kind of known as being the smaller watch, 33 millimeter, 35 millimeter. But in fact, Patek did do 48 millimeters. They were all done at the commission by the Gondolo Gang. Okay. Now, those shapes are called the Gondolo because the majority of them were either a square shape, a rectangular shape, or a tonneau shape. Okay. So we have a couple here that sort of exude that Gondolo flavor, and that's why when you see a reference number to them, it may or may not be referred to as a Gondolo because it's actually not a specific name until 1993, because from the 19-teens until 1993, that wasn't really what they were called, right? They still paid homage to, you could have watches from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s that paid homage to the Gondolo designs, but that wasn't reestablished until 1993 when they started coming up with ladies' pieces, which is what we have here. So this is more of a Calatrava look because it's got the round style, right?
Right.
But the thing is it's heavily jeweled. And you see the diamonds on the dial, around the bracelet. This is the same thing that the Gondolo Gang did.
Okay.
Because they were jewelers. They encrusted things with diamonds. They had commissioned pieces from Patek that were all diamonds, sapphires, emeralds, rubies, those kinds of things. These were not seen all over the rest of the world. So it'd be interesting to know where those watches are today.
Right.
Because I'm sure a lot of them exist. We just don't hear a lot about them. So we have some interesting designs from like the 1970s and 1980s where they really got crazy. You know, in the 1970s, I think design got strange with the avocado greens and the shag carpets and the really strange, pastel colors.
There were suddenly no rules.
There were no rules.
You could do anything you wanted.
Right. So you started getting bracelets that were interwoven with gold. They look like wicker, right? You know, the wicker chairs. Remember those?
Yep.
So this design is just one of those, I don't know what you call it, designs. It's a funky design. It's strange. It's really great looking, though. It evokes that jewelry feel, which is, there again, a throwback to what the Gondolo Gang did. If it looked like jewelry, that's what they wanted, right? This square piece is particularly unique to me. I love it.
That's so beautiful.
I don't even know how to describe it because in order to really get the great feel of it, you have to see it in person. I think even though it's a smaller watch, it looks great on almost anybody's wrist. And in fact, I could even wear this watch. What's interesting about it is when you wind it, it has a distinct sound. It's very mechanical. It's got it makes a lot of noise. To me, that's attractive in a watch.
The curve of the crystal on that is just so interesting how it's integrated into the shape and design of the watch. And I agree with you, with a vintage watch like this, even bigger people, you can wear a vintage watch. It just looks like you inherited it. It looks like it could have been your grandfather's watch that got passed down to you.
Right. And because of the design and the overall feel of this watch, we don't have an exact year for this watch. Well, the extract does. But we don't have an exact feel for when this was manufactured, which is strange, right?
Right.
So That's one of the reasons why we don't go out of our way here at Swiss Watch Expo to place a year on, especially watches like this. Because you can have remakes, you can have specially commissioned pieces, because Patek Philippe and Vacheron and other companies do commission pieces. There may be only 1, 5, 10, 100, who knows, of these pieces out there. And that's why there's not a lot of information on these individuals.
And that's why it's a little hard to say with a watch like this, for there to ever have been a point where someone could look at this and have it'd be an instantly recognizable shape, and they know what year and what the model was and all that sort of thing. They're so individual and so unique that you could buy that watch and never see another person wearing it in your lifetime.
Absolutely. And so one of the things to remember, the tonneau shape, which is it starts out at the top. It looks, if you took a rectangle and expanded out the sides, right? It kind of has that.
The word tonneau actually means barrel, so it's flat on the top and bottom and curved on the sides, like a barrel.
Kind of like what happens to us when we get older. Henry Graves was a banker. He was a multimillionaire. They were involved in the railroad business. He was really famous because he created the super complication watch through Patek Philippe.
Okay.
He commissioned this piece because it was a competition during the 20s. We've talked about this in another video. One of the things that he did was he wore a tonneau-shaped watch. It was his favorite watch. It was a minute repeater. It had the first gold pieces internally. The hammers were gold. It had a very distinct sound. The watch recently sold in 2019 at Sotheby's for $4.75 million. And so that's important. Why? Because anytime you see that tonneau shape, it's really Patek's shape. It's really the Gondolo gang shape, by the way. That's where it originally started. And that's why Frank Mueller, a lot of people look at the Frank Mueller and they don't understand what the Master Banker series or the Banker series is. It's the Henry Graves Banker series. It's a historical tribute to that original tonneau shape. And that was the result of the.
Now, certainly they might have popularized it, and there's lots of conflicting information out there about the history of different things. I've seen at least one article said that Cartier first came out with the tonneau shape in 1908, and that it was Louis Cartier's design that was then picked up by other people. Who knows? Give us in the comments if you have any comment on that, if you have any authoritative source about where that first tonneau shape came out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, really the Gondolo gang sort of started in 1872, went to like 1927. So it was some time during that period that shape actually became popularized. Packard, of the Packard automobile series, watches and cars always go together.
Sure.
Packard had some of his famous pieces, and he was really happy with too. One of the things that we haven't talked about in this lineup here is the Nautilus design, which is, folks have strong opinions about that particular design because of the original inventor of this particular watch, and that person is
Gerald Genta. But I'll say, I think that might be the best looking Nautilus I've ever seen.
Yeah, and this is a ladies' piece. There again, it has the diamonds, the subtle diamonds around the outside edge and the diamonds on the dial, and it's amazing. So, it's got a unique design on the bracelet too. I don't see that design on the bracelet it takes the men's style, but it truly is different than the men's bracelet. So this is a watch that we rarely see here in the ladies' form in the Nautilus, especially in solid gold.
Right.
It isn't part of the Gondolo series, it's just part of the funky Patek. So call us, talk to us about these watches, add one to your collection, make sure that you enjoy all of the things that watchmaking in the watchmaking world has to offer. Research it, and also remember, one thing I should remind folks, wind your watch. Because it's the most important thing you can do. I know it seems like a simple task, but we get that question all the time. So, wind your watch. Fresh from the showcase here at Swiss Watch Expo. Leave comments, let us know, argue with this, tell us things we don't know, tell us things we got wrong factually. Maybe you know something we don't. And we'll be happy to respond or at least listen.